welcome to Coffee Code and Culture Season 2. I'm here with Josh Humphrey, who was one of the hosts last season. I'm joining this season as one of the hosts as well. You might recognize me from the podcast about imposter syndrome, but I apparently impostered well enough that they asked me to come back as a host. So
Fooled me.
today, I have fooled everybody. Now, today we'll be talking about breaking barriers. So Josh, I'm gonna pass it to you. What is a barrier? What do we mean by breaking barriers?
Talking about like blockers you may encounter and how to deal with them and when to raise your hand and say, I'm stuck, I need help.
Yeah, I know I've definitely had times where I'm working on something and I'm getting stuck, and then I'm thinking, okay, how stuck is too stuck? Like at what point do I ask somebody for help? At what point do I keep chugging through it? So, what's been your experience with blockers?
Aside from like waiting for other work to be completed or like not getting all the information from a client, like those I think are blockers, but then also like if you have a bug you can't figure out or you have to approach a task that you don't know how to do, um, blockers as well. And in code school, they taught us to use the 20-minute rule. Like if you're banging your head against something for 20 minutes and you're making no progress, like don't waste more time, ask for help. And I would like to say that I always do that. Sometimes I'm stubborn, like I can figure this out, but I end up wasting a lot of time. And sometimes you just need a fresh pair of eyes to look at it and see what you've done
Yeah,
wrong.
absolutely. I know there's been times where somebody's asking me for help and they've tried everything that they can, they've researched it, and then I come over, and this has happened, the other way around as well. But I come over and within about 10 seconds, I'm like, did you try this? Or did you try this? And it was the one thing that they were missing, and I was able to get them unstuck.
Yeah. And sometimes all you need to do is put a message in Slack about it so everyone can see that you're having a problem. Then you'll instantly figure it out. And then, so try that first. Post the message if it doesn't come to
Yes.
you and move on from there.
It kind of sounds like the rubber duck method, if you've heard of that, of like telling your problem to something and you sometimes figure it out. There you go.
I got
I've
my
got
little
one
guy over here.
around here somewhere. I have more at the other office. But I've done that where you just talk through your problem, or in the middle of asking the question, you figure out the answer. So you're like, sorry for throwing a bunch of words at you, but thanks for getting me unstuck.
What I've been doing recently is like if I get stuck, before I ask about it, I'll write everything down like on paper. Like this is what my goal is, this is what's actually happening. And sometimes I can get it from that. Just like it's a lot easier to do that sometimes and try and like sift through a bunch of code. But let's talk about how you ask for help.
Hmm.
Like if I got a message that was just like, "Hey, do you have a second?" I'm like, "Yeah," but if they were like, "Hey, do you have a second to talk about this?" That's better. But what's even better if they're like, "Hey, do you have a second to talk about X? I've tried Y and Y." And that's going to get you a better response and not annoy your coworkers.
Oh, absolutely. And it's a lot easier if you're the one helping somebody else instead of having to go through that whole list of, okay, did you try this? Did you
Mm-hmm.
try this? Did you try turning your computer off and back on again? Um, Already seeing something that they've tried or seeing that they've put the effort into trying to solve it, I think gives them that position where they want to help you because they're like, okay, clearly you're not just wanting me to do the work for you.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think some people fall into that of, oh, this is hard. I don't want to do it. I'm just going to ask somebody for help and try to get them to do it for me. But saying like, I've tried this didn't work. I tried this didn't work. What else do you think I should try?
Mm-hmm.
Is definitely helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't know why, but like sometimes when I'm asking for help, I feel like I'm bothering my teammates, because I'll get into a place where like I'm focusing and then if I could get a message that pops up on the screen. It takes me a while to get back into it. So I always feel like I'm annoying people. Not always, but sometimes. It used to be always when I started out, but it's just part of it now.
Yeah, I've definitely done that too. I'm like, is it worth me spending an extra 15 minutes trying to figure it out because I might be super close to the solution? Or should I just ask somebody for help? Or it's a little bit easier when you're in the office and I can like see people working. I can
Hmm.
tell if somebody's like in a meeting or looks like they're super focused. But I can imagine with Slack or other calendars, you can put like focus time. Some people have their calendars like this is my focus time. This is my yeah, not unfocused time, but more free to
Hmm.
switch to other tasks time. So I think that could be helpful as well. Is if other people are using that, then you can take advantage of that when you're asking for help.
It's tough, like to know, like you said, like you see the green circle and you're like, oh, they're online. I won't message someone with the do not disturb thing up unless I really have to.
Right.
But I never put that status like I should so people can see that I'm like focusing on something.
I feel like when I am super focused on what I'm doing code wise and I see a message from somebody else, as long as it doesn't look super urgent, a lot of times I will try to finish what I'm working on and then get to the message within like a reasonable amount of time.
Right.
So I'm aware of like other people asking for help. I like can either choose to stay on task for a little bit longer, or if it's something that I know I can get back to easily enough, then I can go ahead and switch tasks real quick and then come back to whatever I was doing.
So I guess let's talk about what we do before like we reach out for help. We talked about like wanting to give the person all the context. Um, what are some steps you take when you get stuck?
This one is from one of my college teachers who I don't know if I took one of his classes specifically, but a lot of my friends did. And most of the times in a class, anytime you would ask him a question, his first response was, "Have you Googled it?" And I think that's kind of it depends on the problem you're trying to solve, but I think a lot of times that can be a really helpful step. Throwing it into Chat GPT, throwing it into Google and seeing, okay, is there something that is relatively easy to fix or something that I'm just not thinking of? And the answer is right there. So Googling it is definitely one of the first things I try when I get stuck. And then, like you said, writing stuff out is super helpful for me. So I either have a whiteboard that I use or just a notebook and a pencil and just writing the diagrams of like this connects to this, connects to this. Um, I do that as well. And then just writing down a list of like, okay, I tried this didn't work. I tried this didn't work. And then usually by the time I get to that point, I'm like typing out a message to ask somebody else for help.
I guess it's about the same for me, but my first step is usually swearing. And then I'll Google, look for documentation. Recently, I was working on something, and the documentation for that was real sparse. I couldn't find like all the properties I needed, but ChatGPT was able to tell me like this is what you need, this is what you need. And so he's been a real help, um, and not having to bother my coworkers so much. And I shouldn't say bother, like, because I don't think they feel that way. I don't feel that way when someone asks me for help. So I don't know why I feel like I'm bothering people.
I think it kind of goes along with the imposter syndrome. It's like everybody experiences it and then they assume that they're the only people that do. They're like, oh, I'm the only person that bothers other people. Nobody else, everybody else can ask for help. And, it doesn't bother me, but I'm sure when I ask for help, it bothers people.
I doubt that it
But
does, unless
probably not, at
you're
least not
just like,
here.
hey, do you have a second?
My
That's
first
not
instinct whenever I get those messages is, what did I do? Am I in trouble?
right.
What did I break? Um, yeah. No, your first step of swearing at the code, though, gives a different definition to a programming language.
That was good. I liked that. Now that we've talked about identifying the blockers, what to do, or like how to ask for help, what do you do once you've solved it? Because I've really not done myself any favors in the past, like fixing something and then just being like, all right, that's fixed. instead of writing down like what happened or documenting it somewhere, because you're probably going to run into it again at some point. And it's nice to have
Yes.
something to reference and look up what you did.
Yeah, I've definitely done that and like found the answer on a really obscure like second page of Google results. And like all the way in a Reddit, like at the bottom of the comment section, found the answer right there and then implemented it and then forgot about it and then ran into the same problem. Like I know the answer was there somewhere, but it took me a really long time to find and now I can't find it. And now I'm stuck again. Um, I do that pretty often. I feel like a lot of times once I figure something out or fix something, my brain wants to figure out why that worked. So once I figure out the why that worked, it tends to stick better in my brain. So I'm less likely to get stuck in the same place. But something else that I like to do is just documentation, either because the documentation for it doesn't exist, or if somebody else after me is touching the same piece of code, I want them to know, like, hey, this is this way because of this bug or because of this feature or because this is the only way I can get it to work. So either that documentation or just code comments. I'm a big fan of reasonable commenting code. Not like every line has an explanation and a timestamp, but hey, this looks weird. It's because of this. Those comments have been pretty helpful as well.
I would love to say that I'm very good at leaving comments in my code, but I let it slip a lot of the times. I'm just like, this makes sense. But I know, like I just talked about this a while ago, like, yeah, it's gonna make sense to you because you wrote it. Like that's how your brain works. But like looking at someone else's code and trying to understand how their brain works and how they got to that point without any comments is really difficult. Kind of saying that to myself, like drive home the point to write comments.
And even I know I've looked at code before and I'm like, who wrote this? This doesn't make any sense. And then I trace it back in GitHub or whatever tool I'm using. I'm like, oh, that was that was me about
Yeah.
4 months ago.
Yeah, I've done that too. I'm like, who did this? It's me. But I did this just the other day with like I got stuck on something and I was like trying to upload a file to like a message, but then if you deleted the attachment like from the message before you sent it, you couldn't upload another file. And I
Mm.
fixed that in one place and I was like, all right, great. Then it came up in another place and I got stuck on it again because I didn't document it anywhere. But then something even cooler than documentation, or I guess both of these combined, is once you figure out something like that, think about how you can make it like a more dynamic long-term solution. So this just doesn't become a problem in the future. And that's kind of what
Mm.
we're trying to do with our internal library, but everyone's been busy with clients, so struggling.
Yep. Those clients always getting in the way of our personal projects.
Yeah, I can't believe they would do that.
Going back to something you said earlier about like figuring out what the blocker is or figuring out how to get around the blocker. Um, I think assumptions play a really big role in blockers as well, because a lot of times they're either assumptions that you make intentionally or assumptions that you make unintentionally. Like, I assume the code is supposed to work this way and that this is supposed to go here and this is supposed to go here. And then you get stuck and then you ask for help. And then you find out, oh, it's not supposed to go like this, from A to B to C. It's actually supposed to go from like A to C to E back to B. And because you were assuming it was going like in one direction, finding out that other bit of information, correcting one of those assumptions can get you unstuck.
Mhm.
That's one of the things I ran into today, um, working on this really weird bug that's kind of hard to reproduce. And I was poking around in the database and I found this really weird relationship between two tables. And I was like, okay, who designed this? This is not the way you're supposed to design a database. I'm really confused. I don't understand why this points to this, points to this other thing over here. It's like a database love triangle. Um, and I asked one of the other developers about it, and he's like, oh yeah, it's because of this edge case, or this can be a group and not an individual, so you can have this relationship to this other table over here look a little bit different in that situation. So knowing that extra piece of data, I mean, I'm not stuck on the bug, I'm still working on it. But that got me unstuck. It helped
Yeah.
me get past, where it was.
Some things are just hard to do. Like I was working on something today that was really confusing and a bug I couldn't figure out. And I was like, I should ask for help on this. But I felt like it would have been a like too many cooks situation. Like I wrote this. I don't know if like trying to go through it with someone else will help. So I don't know if I don't want to say like you should always ask for help. And then, I just did that, but I don't know. I guess like pick your battles. When to call in your reinforcements.
In my head, there's like this almost equation that I use, and I can't explain it super well. But the different factors are, okay, how much time is it going to take me to work through this? Am I making progress? Have I been making progress? How much time is it going to take me to explain this to somebody else? Because I've had those problems where I'm like 2 days into it and there's just a lot of information, a lot of factors to deal with that it would take an hour to explain to somebody. And sometimes that's what you need to get unstuck. But other times you're like, okay, if this is going to take me an hour to explain to somebody, let me try this one other thing first. And then just figuring out, like, okay, is this something that I'm making progress in and I'm learning? Or is this something that I'm getting really frustrated with?
Mhm.
Because when I hit that like emotional frustrated point, I know I need to take a step back, go for a walk, get a drink, something like that first, and then ask for help, and then come back to it with a clear head. And that does wonders.
That helps quite a bit. I think we discussed that in one of our other episodes. Just like take a break. If you're banging your head against it, if you've already asked for help and that didn't work out, go take a break. Like go outside.
Touch some grass,
Yeah, maybe not today because it's cold, but you can look
touch some
outside.
frost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something that's kind of difficult for us, like working remotely and like only having, like not having a bunch of, say, front end developers on one project. Like if I need help with something front end and I need to ask another developer, it might take more time for me to explain like all the context of what's happening before we can actually like get to fixing the problem. And I guess that's another balance thing. Like you were saying, like that's factors into your equation kind of bit of a good bit.
Yep.
Talking's
Yeah.
hard.
Figuring out it is. It is. And like once the train of speech derails, it just kind of keeps going. You have to like stop, restart the sentence,
Yeah.
continue. Yeah. Okay, so we've covered different like what are blockers, assumptions we make with the blockers, how to identify when you're actually stuck, when to ask for help, how to ask for help. What other questions or topics do we want to cover?
I think that's like mostly what I had in mind. One other thing is like don't rely on just your like developer coworkers, but your managers should be there to help you. So uh like communicate that to them early as possible. Like this could be a problem. All right, now it is a problem, just so it's on everyone's radar.
And I think that helps them too. I'm thinking specifically of like project managers, um, to help them track either the tasks or the progress or just timing of things. Just knowing, even if they don't have like their hands in the code, just to know, okay, Amy's stuck on this bug. This bug looks like it's going to be a lot harder than we thought. I'm going to make sure that that has some extra time or extra resources, or, I'm not going to expect that to be done tomorrow.
Yeah, they're there to help, and it, covers you if you like raising flags in Slack. Yeah, but I think that about sums it up. I don't have anything else to say. So, Amy, do you?
I think the summary would be, don't let yourself get stuck for too long. Ask for help. Other people want to be there to help you, whether that's like your other developers or managers, and you can learn from digging through it, but you can also learn from other people's perspectives. And if all else fails, swear at your code and take a walk.
Yeah, that's a great summary. I'm glad you're here because I would have just ended on I have nothing else to say. All right, well, Amy, thanks for carrying the conversation today. And thanks for watching or listening. And join us next time where we'll talk about something else.